Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another deck build. Now, I know that when I did my build for the 39th and 79th, I talked about the 4th being the other division which people had suggested to me was probably up there in the top 3 for the PACT divisions. So today I'm going to do the 4th Motsuchin division. It's a Sunday, it's a nice chilled video. So I had a quick look at what I made last time for my last video, which you can see on the channel as well. There are going to be some changes to it, mostly probably in the infantry section. Certainly the logistics section is going to alter very slightly. We'll see where we get to after that. So last time I took one set of the MTLB munitions, so the supply vehicles, and that was it. I took that and a command. This time I'm actually going to suggest taking 2 of these. The reason is I think supply has become more and more useful as the game has progressed in its development, and it's so important for bolstering your front line now. There is the option of the big trucks. Now, they're not bad. Obviously, 3 of the other ones is, you know, slightly less than what you would get here. So 3 of the other ones is 60 for the T813 Mun would, you know, give you 1750, which is 250 more than 3 of the little vehicles. The issue is there's only 3 of them. It limits to where you can move around. Now what they could be useful for is, for example, moving to your artillery or something like that, where you're not going to have to move them around very much, where you don't want them very spread out. So that is an option if you want to go down that route. And obviously, you know, you're getting the equivalent of more than 9 of those. So technically, it probably works out more cost effective to get the big trucks. But you have to consider that there's only 3 of them. And even if they're adding something that will make them go to units that need resupply automatically and trying to take that out of your hands, it doesn't mean they're going to resupply the one you want, etc, etc. So there's some argument for having more control. My advice is this: if you're using a lot of artillery, there's no reason not to take this instead of both of the smaller vehicles. Also, if you are planning to utilize the automatic control of that a lot, you know, the automatic smart order, then again, maybe it's not such a bad idea. But I leave that with you. Personally, I'd rather take 2 of the 10 stacks and have that little bit more control over where I'm sending stuff. Now, obviously there is the chopper. The chopper can get to more places faster. It is exactly the same price as 3 of the smaller vehicles, the MTLBs. So its advantage is it's a chopper. That also means it can be shot down easily if it's in the air and it gets caught in a bad position by either an enemy aircraft or, you know, air defenses. So again, it's something that you could be using to resupply your forces on the ground. You get 4 of them. That's quite a lot of supply in the grand scheme of things. It probably works out more, again, than the MTLB overall, because 4 times 1,500 is still going to be better than the 5,000 you get from the MTLB by 1,000, no less. But again, it's up to you and how you play and whether you want to take them. Cost-wise, it's pretty efficient, but I leave that to you. Now, in terms of your command options, you get quite a few options here. You obviously get vehicle with a bit of armor, vehicle with a bit of armor and weaponry. BMP-1 I quite like. The helicopter, you know how I feel about command helicopters. I'm very good at getting them shot down or blown up in war games, so I'm very reluctant as ever to bring them in WARNO. But if you're confident with them, no reason not to. This is pretty good for 100 points. You know, it's going to be a bit faster than this thing up here because that thing's tracked. This thing isn't. Less armor on the front. Who cares about the armor on the front? And the same again here. It's got a gun on it. I don't think that gun's worth 15 points personally. It doesn't have any extra armor. You don't get more with anything, so there's not like one that's got 4 commands in. It's all 3. So for me, if you're going to take an armed one that's got a bit of front armor, I would go with the BMP-1K. because at least it's got plenty of firepower. It could defend itself versus a small force that isn't close in terms of infantry, and, you know, it can take out small vehicles with that main cannon. The other option is you go cheap and cheerful for the 100 points and just grab this thing. And honestly, that's what I'm going to do here. There's definitely an element of, you know, a benefit to taking this with its cannon and its missile. The missile obviously not the most accurate, but the cannon's pretty good and it's got a machine gun. So for me, if you're going to take one of the armed ones, go with the BMP rather than the BTR-60. Let's move on to infantry though. So, you know, the 4th Matsuchin is infantry heavy, which as ever is a good thing in this game, where it's let down a bit as its tank department, but it still maintains that it's a good deck because of the infantry and because of its ability to forward deploy some of that infantry. So I'm not a big fan of the UAZs with cannons on and things like that. They die very easily. Some people might be able to use them very effectively, but I would give them a wide berth. In terms of the other things available here, I think in the previous deck I took both the Faggot and the Conkers. I actually wouldn't bother taking both anymore. I'd only take one of them, and I'd probably take the Conkers. I think the reason for taking both before was because of the forward deployment. I kind of feel as though the SPG-9 in its forward deployment role would be just as useful as the ATGM launcher. Yes, the ATGM launcher has a longer range, but I don't know. I kind of, the SPG-9s are pretty good, and they're very good at taking out little vehicles. And there's sort of a lot of dice rolls, or more dice rolls involved in the ATGM fire mechanism and the missile actually hitting its target than there tends to be with what is effectively acting as a tank gun. So the SPG-9 has an advantage there. Obviously, slightly less damage. So, you know, versus tanks, or heavier tanks, it's not going to be as useful. But I'll just pin them and you can put them right next to each other. So, you know, range obviously better, accuracy. Don't rely too much on that here, because the amount of dice rolls that are going on for the missile is a lot more than the dice rolls that are technically going on for the tank gun. Obviously rate of fire, it's going to be slightly faster technically for one than the other, but one has a lot more rounds than the other, so it's very difficult to swing it one way or the other. In my mind, I'm actually going to try out the SPG-9s because they're cheaper. And I feel like early game, if I'm trying to just take out incoming vehicles, that's quite handy. And also, I believe these things will fire at infantry, which the missiles don't. So I'm going to stick those in. And then in terms of the actual missile units, I would probably take the Conkers. In terms of the vehicle, you know, there's plenty of options here. You get lots of the BMPs. You also get the BTR. The BTR is the same as the UAZ, but the UAZ you can sell. This has 2 guns on. This has 1 gun on. I mean, there's something to be said for the BMP ones because they have that fantastic cannon as well. But I think these are already an expensive unit to bring in. I kind of, in the back of my mind, I do worry about them in the sense that they only have the missile. You're going to have to bring something else in to defend them. So you can either make the decision that something else to defend them is going to be the vehicle they come in with, or it's going to be another infantry squad you bring in. I will probably bring them in the UAZ because that is my preference, but, you know, there's something to be said for bringing in a vehicle. I just worry that the vehicles are going to get popped very easily. So, UAZ for me. You got the Pioneer Flams with the flamethrower. I haven't tested these properly in a while. They'd certainly improved last time I tested them. I think I'd stick them in just out of curiosity and then remove them if they're terrible. That's more of an experiment for me. You might wish to not take them if you know better that they're not great. Again, I would take them in a truck so I can sell it, because these guys are just, you know, primarily going to be going into buildings. Maybe in the forest a bit. I'd have to test them out in the forest. So that's a bit of experimentation, that one. I always end up with a couple of units in my decks that I'm just planning to experiment with. Because, you know, I don't test every unit every patch. That would be insane. Pioneers. Very much something that we always want to bring in. The satchel charges are still very good. You get 9 of these guys as ever. They're a decent squad to bring in. We want them for the satchels. Again, I'm just bringing them in a truck because I don't want to say these guys are cannon fodder, but I'm using them for their satchel charges and they're going in first. So, sorry to the Pioneers. Let's just hold for a minute and have a quick look at the commands, just since it's next on the list here. So you've got the Pioneer Foot, which is decent in terms of its launcher, 18 penetration. It's only a 4-man squad. You got the Matsuchin, which is only a 4-man squad, and you've got the Jaeger, which is only a 4-man squad. So, you know, what you're looking for here is how much you want to spend there. 125. Now, the advantage to them is they are forward deployable. They've got the little parachute. These guys up here are pretty much the same squad. Yeah, they're 5 points cheaper though. And then you've got the Pioneer Foot, which is, you know, its advantage is the launcher. So, I mean, really, it's up to you what you want to bring in. You get 3 of them either way. Weirdly, the interesting thing here is you can have 4 cards of these ones. So if you did want to bring in lots of infantry commanders, there is an option for that. I think for 5 points, I would actually take the forward deployable ones, because if you're in a map where at the start you want to quickly take a point, nothing wrong with doing that. Because if we head back to logistics, none of these have forward deployment. Not even the chopper. So if you do want a forward deploy command, it's going to be that one. So that would be my reasoning for having that in there. Now, in terms of the other units available, you've obviously got Matsuchin in a BTR, you've got Matsuchin standard. You get slightly more of them in a squad, they're 5 points more. These guys get 1 person less. In terms of what's different between them, obviously you get 9 of one, you get 6 of the other. Weapons-wise, I mean, they're almost identical, except you get 1 more AK-74, obviously because there's 1 extra person. So it depends if that 1 extra person is worth the 5 points to you, but I like the fact that there's 9 of these. You can also call in 4. These can also come in a BMP if you are so inclined. These guys only come in a SPW 70 at best, so it's all about the guns there. Some people really like the vehicles with guns. There were advantages in Wargame when used carefully as fire support units to your infantry, but they still tended to get popped very quickly because people focus them down. So, is it worth the 5 extra points? If you're going to utilize them carefully and you find them helpful, yes. If you're just going to use the infantry for infantry, take them in a transport that you can sell. That's my advice. Matsuchin BMPs are very good at the end of the day. They're not bad units at all. They're good for taking out enemy vehicles. They can do damage to tanks. Don't underestimate them. They're not terrible. You know, the high explosive anti-tank rather than kinetic energy, but they're still pretty decent. You got the Panzerjäger, which are these guys with the double RPGs. Very good against vehicles in towns, very good against vehicles in forests. Very good getting behind enemy lines and blowing up everything on their supply lines. Obviously also good for killing a CV, though maybe overkill. Again, these guys come in a range of vehicles. What I'd actually say for these guys is when you're looking at vehicles, have a little look at their autonomy. So the BTR 50 is only 4 kilometers. The SPW 70 is 8, and the truck is also 8. This is actually the fastest. This is actually pretty slow across ground. The reason I'm saying that is because, as I just said, these infantry would be very good for getting round behind enemy lines. So if you're sending them round the back of the map in all of the forests on certain maps, to get there, you want the best autonomy and you want the best speed. So if you're going to play these guys in a mischievous way, then I would actually take them in the SPW-70. And that's what I'm going to do. That would be my reasoning for it. Obviously, it's up to you what you're planning to do with them. You could just bring them in a truck. Or you could bring them in a BMP. Now, what's left? We're going to fill all these slots. We also have the option of the Motsuchin SMG. These are the machine gunners. Basically, they have 3 PKMs. I'm just going to pin those for a second because I want to show you something else. If I make them elite so they match, I want to hover over the FS Jaeger SMG. Now, these squads are pretty much identical. The only difference is the FS Jaeger are forward deployable. The Motsuchin are not. The FS Jaeger are 5 points more for the sake of being forward deployable, which is pretty reasonable for that ability at the moment. The other advantage to bringing in the Motsuchin is that at Elite, you get 4, but you also have the option of bringing them in at just Veteran, and that gives you 6, and Veteran should be more than enough for this. So, what you're doing here is taking the trade-off that you only get 3 instead of 6 for forward deployment of these units. I don't think these units are particularly worth forward deploying, as it stands right now. Maybe you disagree. I think there are other infantry which are better suited to that, but that would be my choice. Now these guys, I'm going to be bringing them in as support infantry for other infantry. I'd like them to come in as cheap as possible, and I will bring them in a little truck, so I can sell it later. You know me, I like bringing in transports I can sell so that I can buy more stuff. Not everyone feels that way. Some people will prefer to bring in something with guns on. That's perfectly fine. You have to make that decision for yourself. Now, FS Jaeger and FS Jaeger Metis. The FS Jaeger Metis, you don't get any other Metis launchers in this deck, but Metis launchers are very good. They've saved my bacon many a time. I am definitely bringing them in. They're forward deployable. They only come in that truck. Done. FS Jaeger and Motsuchin. We're going to pin them. So, FS Jaeger and Motsuchin. Again, they're the same. Except the Motsuchin get 2 light machine guns and 1 less AK-74, or AKS-74 in this case. Now, the FS Jaeger is forward deployable. The Motsuchin are not. The FS Jaeger can come in a truck. The Motsuchin BTR can come in a BTR, and the Motsuchin, the standard ones, which are 1 guy less but still have the 2 machine guns, you can have 9 of them instead of 6. They come in at the same veterancy level, and you can bring them in the BMP. Now, what you'll notice is so far I've not brought anything in a BMP, and this is where I'm going to do that. You have the option of the BMP-1 or the BMP-2. Is that missile worth 10 points to you? For harassment at range, potentially. I feel like I'm going to use these more for their gun at closer ranges and try and get them near the enemy vehicles. So I'll probably bring them in the standard BMP-1 SP, but there's nothing wrong with going for the SP-2. Nothing at all. I think they're both good units, but for my personal play style, I'm trying to rely less on missiles because of the amount of dice rolls they go through. Personal choice. Some people love them and are very effective with them, and they spam them. That's fine. So, Motsuchin go in like that. Now, you have a choice in terms of what else you bring in. You could bring in some FS Jaeger for the forward deployment capability, but honestly, I feel I've got enough forward deployable stuff here. If I'm going to forward deploy, it's going to be the SPG-9s, it's going to be the command, and it's going to be the FS Jaeger Metis. Because the Metis to me are the most useful for forward deploying, to put in the edges of towns and, you know, the edges of forests to take out incoming forces early in the game. By the time the enemy forces have overrun them, reinforcements should have arrived. And that's where the other stuff comes in. So then it's a case of what else are you going to bring in here? We've already got the Matsuchin SMGs for that fire support, so I'm just going to bring in more standard infantry. The BTR guys come in with an extra member, but you only get 6 of them. I'm still going to be relying on an amount of infantry spam, so I'm actually going to bring in more Matsuchin, but I'm not going to bring them in a BMP this time. I'm just going to bring them in the cheapest option possible that I can sell, which is just going to be the truck. So I've got a couple of options for my basic infantry, so to speak, the Matsuchin there. I can bring them in a BMP1 for certain situations, and when I just need an emergency reinforcement, I can bring them in 5 points cheaper and then sell their vehicle. So I get that 20 points back. Again, it's my personal choice. You might feel differently regarding the vehicle, and a lot of people, I'm sure, like to bring in vehicles with machine guns on because they feel it is useful. That's fine. Now, in terms of artillery, obviously things have changed a lot since I made my last 4th Matsuchin deck. Artillery is actually now pretty good. I haven't tried the Smirch of late, but obviously the Urgan was quite an improvement, so maybe the Smirch is a lot better as well. Now, here we do have the 120mm mortars, and I definitely want to bring those in. They're just coming in a UAZ though. I mean, the MTLB is an option, but UAZ is fine for me. I want as many as possible, so we bring in all 4 like that. We have the option of the D30 cannons. These can also be used as cannons and not just artillery pieces. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I think they're quite a nice unit. I'm tempted to bring them in. My only concern is that they only come in the MTLB. But I like something that's got a little bit of harassment, and there's 4 available. So, as I may have said in my previous video, I quite like options like this for counter battery that's just a little bit annoying, but probably powerful enough to do damage to most people's artillery or their mortars, but perhaps aren't going to scare a frontline tank quite as much. Now, there is also the Akatasia, and I keep pronouncing it Akatasia, but it's actually, as I've been told in my recent video, I should say, the T and S come out as ZZ, so like pizza. So it's more like Acacia or something like that. I apologize, I'm still butchering it, but it's more like that. I hope that makes you happy that I'm trying at least. Now, you only get 2 of these, so you literally are bringing in 2 stacks if you want 4. And we've seen people do that a lot. And it's probably worth it for the power of the gun. This goes back to 120 or the 122mm, the same as the D30 cannon. It's a challenge here, because obviously the numbers have been reduced. Price-wise, there's a 50-point difference. And I am struggling, but I know that it's also going to be beneficial to have 4 of these as opposed to 4 of these and 2 of these. So you're going to have to make a very personal decision here, and actually for a change I'm going to take 2 of those after seeing how effective they were in one of the recent tournament games. We'll see how it pans out for me. It might not work for me. I have a different playstyle, and I play mostly team games, so we'll see. Let's move on to tanks. Tanks is where this division is weaker. However, it's not completely weak. This division has the advantage of numbers of spammable tanks. So you do have the flame tank. I'm going to ignore that for the minute. You got the T55A. You want 12 of those. Straight away, no messing. Then you have the options of the T55 AM2B. I quite like this because it's got the very nice missile on it. I like this missile. you've got this one, which is missing the missile. I think that's worth it for 90 points. I wouldn't rank it up either. I just bring 6 of those. Because again, you're talking about a cheap tank. The T-55 AM2, again, you're getting 6 of them. I want more tanks, so I'm going to take it. And I'm not going to rank it up. This is all about numbers and spammability. Remember, these are much cheaper than most of the big top-end tanks. You're relying on numbers of these. You're relying on 4 T-55As to take out an Abrams or something like that. So keep that in mind. You want numbers here. Now, you could take another stack of those. You obviously have the option of things like the Conquer's vehicles. You also have here the PACT MT-12 100mm. That's not a bad gun either. It's not got the best range, but it can also fire missiles at a very long range. Not the best accuracy, but not bad. Don't bring them in with no transport, or you'll spend a year trying to get them to the front line. I actually would personally bring them in, because I do feel that these have a place in the game right now. Because, you know, they have the same range as your tanks, but again, they're a little bit cheaper, and they have a missile. So don't forget that, you know, these are going to be in defensive positions, and more for their missile than anything else. But the issue with them is, and this is the one thing you have to be aware of, you have to spend money to bring them in with a vehicle. So it actually puts them up to 85. So you're getting closer to that 90 point mark for the tank. Now, what these can't do is run away from incoming artillery fire very fast. They're not going to be like your tank, able to reverse. So you're going to have to be careful how you use them. I'm certainly going to take another set of the T-55s and just taking all of them. And the flame tank, they're still not like the flame tanks from Wargame Red Dragon. And while I love them in Wargame Red Dragon, I'm still umming and ahhing over their usefulness in this game a lot of the time. So I'm going to leave it out for now, but I think it's something that I will test again in upcoming patches and just see where we're at with it. I'll take a command tank. You get 2 of these. You only get 1 of these. I don't really care very much for the fact that that has 3 more armor, because a command tank shouldn't be taking fire. So I'd rather have something that's a little bit cheaper, and I have 2 of them instead of 1 to bring in. Now, that's really it in terms of the tanks you can bring in. You now have the option of bringing in the Conquer's thing, but I'm going to move on and maybe come back if I feel like I have points to spare at the end. But I've got the spammability that I will rely on here. The Conquer's would just be an added harassment tool that will hopefully do some damage. Recon, there's plenty of options. So you've got the Aufkel PT-76 or 768. This is a 76B. This is a 76B. That's alright. Not the best armor, but it does have a nice little gun. Some people have used these quite effectively. You will have noticed, I believe, the last person I saw use them very effectively was P.U. Tanner. So, you know, they have their place. They are spammable as a unit, never mind just as recon. You have the BRDM2. Not really fussed about that, to be honest. It's only got very good optics. And you have the Aufklärer BRM1. This has exceptional optics. That's good. Take that. Exceptional optics are good in the game now. Optics are still going to be undergoing adjustment, I'm sure. But right now, there's no reason not to have exceptional in my book. Infantry. Definitely want some infantry. Aufklärer only have a 4-man squad. Aufklärer Heavy are a 7-man squad, which is nice. The FS Eisengruppe have an 8-man squad. Remember, these are the guys that are running American gear. And then the FS Sprengtauscher. Again, running American gear. I mean, you know, I think both of these squads are decent. My only concern with these ones is the fact that you only get 3. And for me, I'm usually relying on numbers when it comes to recon, because recon dies easily because it's usually in the front line or past the front line. So while I really like these squads, I think for their price, even though they're 8-man squads, only getting 3 of them is an issue. The Aufklärer Heavy are actually probably one of my favourites right now, because they're a 7-man squad and you get 6 of them. The Aufklärer, you get double that, you get 12, but they're only a 4-man squad. But you can bring them in the USZ, which has a machine gun and it has Recon now. So I'm going to stick those in. And then I'm also going to take the Aufklärer Heavy, and I'm going to take them in the BMP-1, because 45 points isn't bad for a Recon vehicle that has all that weaponry on it. It will have its own little advantage over some other vehicles. That is why I like that. So I would take that. I don't feel in this particular group, shall we say, or this particular division, there are any units. Maybe these guys I would send behind enemy lines, because there's 8 of them and they've got very good optics and but I think they're expensive, and I feel like I'm already spending a lot on these guys, and I'm kind of keen to have this vehicle. I want to try it out and see how effective it is with just good optics, so we'll do that. A little bit of experimentation with the Aufklärer Heavy coming in the BMP-1, but we'll see. Aufklärer are your standard spammable ones, and now they come in a vehicle which is also Recon. It's quite helpful. I like doing that in Wargame Red Dragon. I like units that come in another Recon unit, because then I have 2. And even if one sees better than the other, it doesn't matter. Let's move on to anti-air, because we're getting closer and closer to that 50-point mark. So you got the Strelas here. They're not great. Let's be honest. They're not the Iglas. I previously had the Strela vehicles here in my deck. I still like having these now. I'm someone who doesn't mind babysitting my radar AA, but I also like to have some AA that I don't have to worry about somewhere closer to the front line, potentially, that is going to be good harassment and potentially get some kills. The Shilkas are still very good. They have a good range. They are radar. I'm going to take them. The Cub has a really, really good range. Its issue is just 3 missiles, but there are definite advantages to bringing it in for this deck. And then I'm going to take the Strela as well. Now the thing that I haven't done here is taken the slightly cheaper Strela, just because I think the bonuses to the second one are worth it. And I haven't taken a man pad, and you know I love a man pad. However, these are very poor compared to other man pads, and I'm just not convinced they're worth it. So I think of the AA options, I like these 3. There's still something to be said for having any kind of man pad. They are very annoying because they're harder to find and kill. But yeah, I think I'm going to try this deck without them for now. You have loads of helicopter options. I'd fill all the 1-point slots if you can stomach it. The Rocket 2 here is a lot more expensive than the Rocket 2 in the other deck we looked at. Which was something that was pointed out to me, because I was complaining obviously about it being just 5 points more than the Rocket 1. Here it is 25 points more than the Rocket 1. So that continues to lead me to believe that it is a pricing error that will eventually be corrected. Some people wondered if it was a balancing thing, but I don't know. I feel like it's a pricing error rather than anything else. So you got the TB, which has some missiles, and it has the rockets. You've got the Rocket 2, which just has rockets. You've got the Gov, which has the gun pods. You've got the Rocket 1, which just has rockets, but half as many as this one. You've got the Mi-24s. They're pretty good. This one has bigger rockets, and weirdly more of them. So, you know, interesting actually. So that's got a nice cannon on it. That's got just rockets. Just looking at them, they're similar in price, and I'm just trying to decide which I like more. I think the rocket one, to be honest. You've got the anti-tank one here, which is quite expensive, but it is the cock-on missile, which is really good. And then you got the AT-2, which is very similar, but with double the amount of missiles and half the amount of rockets. I mean, depends how you want to use it, but I always think the more rockets is better with these things, and then I can just rearm the missiles. But I also have the anti-air option, which has the little infrared missile on it, and also some anti-ground rockets. I don't think that's a bad price, but I feel like we've got plenty of AA, so I'd rather bring in something for harassment. So we're going to go with rocket 2s. We're going to go probably with the, I think we go, for me, it's the Mi-24 PAT, because I get the missile, I get 4 of them. If it's not killed something by that point, it's being pulled back and rearmed anyway. And then I think, again, you know, it comes back to me just wanting more rockets. So for me, rocket spam is king when it comes to Helos. They can take out tanks, they can take out infantry, they can, you know, they're great. Simple as that. Aircraft wise, you have a nice selection again here, and I'd just probably fill the rest of this now with whatever you want from here, to be honest. You've got a lack of Su-25s in this deck. That is my only issue with this deck, because I love the Su-25s. They're very hardy. Anything you take here is much softer, I guess. So you've got, so your MiG-21s, which are your cheaper options up here. You do get one with plenty of rockets on. It includes some 122mm rockets. Rocket attack jets are good. Nothing wrong with those. You've got a couple of options for cheap anti-air here. Obviously, they're all missiles which are fairly short range, so, you know, good for taking out helicopters and things. Not so good at proper air-to-air combat. You got a nice MiG-23 HE bomber with 6 bombs. You've got an anti-tank one, which has a very nice missile, not very accurate though. You got your MiG-23, which is your more staple anti-air, which includes a long-range missile, and that's what I'm going to take. You have the MiG-29 as well, which has an even longer range missile. It is, of course, semi-active radar. It's not fire and forget. Do bear that in mind. Again, very good, but you're paying a lot more for it. How much are you going to be relying on jets as your air defense compared to what you have on the ground? I'll leave that to you. Who are you going to be playing with? What are your allies going to be bringing if you're playing a team game like I would be is also something to consider. You may choose differently if you are building this for 1v1 tournaments or 1v1 matches in ranked. As ever, my decks tend to be more for team games in my head than ranked matches. You get the Su-22 anti-tank, which is more accurate. So if you're going to take one, I'd probably actually take that, bearing in mind that it is very expensive. You get that seed plane, and it's your only seed plane, so you either take it or you don't. And I'd probably take it just as harassment for enemy air defense. You've got the option of the Su-22 HE, which has 4 bombs. Now, I just want to quickly pin this and take a look at the, let's say the MiG. Here we go. So the MiG has more bombs. But what you also have to sort of bear in mind here is you're looking at agility, trajectory, speed, everything else, you know, autonomy, ECM. The MiG-23 has very poor ECM. It has better air optics, but its agility is only good. Its speed is faster. but the ECM of the SU-22 is 30%. So there are advantages to it, but it won't drop as many bombs. It's also cheaper than the MiG-23 MFHE. I personally would take the SU-22 because it's got better ECM and just accept that it goes a bit slower. But its agility is exceptional, so it has other advantages. Again, it's up to you and your personal experience. Personally, I'd rather take this. Also, no, can take out aircraft and helicopters and stuff. I'd take that, though, to be honest, most helicopters are being killed by cannons at the moment. But I like a HE bomb, so I'm going to take that. Cluster options, this is the only cluster option you have in this deck, and it only has 2 bombs. Do you take a cluster or do you take an anti-tank jet when you're talking about this? I'd actually probably take the anti-tank jet. As much as cluster is beneficial in a lot of situations, due to the fact it's only got 2 bombs and it is 300 points, it just doesn't do it for me. Once we're heading up to that kind of price, I would like more bombs. Napalm. As we discovered, napalm is very good in the right situation. It can do a lot of damage to tanks and things. But they are pricey. So again, you're talking about price. We can only afford to take one more air unit here. So make your choice wisely. I'm going to take the anti-tank one. Personal preference. But there are benefits to taking the others. What you could even consider doing is switching out the MiG-23 for the MiG-29. It is a better anti-air jet. But you are paying for that. Again, personal choice. I'm going to be relying a lot on my ground AA rather than air AA. And hopefully playing with someone who has MiG-31s. Now, I've got a point left in this deck. And I'm not sure I have anywhere I can spend a single point. So it might be actually that I just leave it like that. Because I don't really want to drop any of the tanks or the guns, to be honest. So I think I leave it at 49. But let's have a quick recap. So logistics, I'm taking 2 sets of the MTLBs for munitions or supply. And I'm taking the SPW-40 as my command vehicle. Infantry-wise, we've taken the SPG-9 airborne. We've taken the Conkers non-airborne. We've taken the Pioneer Flams. We've taken the Pioneers. We've taken the FS Jägerfurt, which can be forward deployed. We've taken the Panzerjäger because they're quite good for getting behind enemy lines, and that's why they earn SPW for the mobility that offers. We've got the Motsuchin SMG with all the machine guns. We've got the Jaeger Metis because Metis launches are great. We've got Motsuchin in a BMP and Motsuchin in a standard truck to give us 2 price points and the fact that we can sell the trucks to get 20 points back. Artillery, I like mortars, so we've got a stack of the mortars, and then just for a change, rather than taking the D30s, I've gone for 2 of the self-propelled artillery, and we'll see how that pans out for me. Next up in tanks, we've gone for the T55As, we've gone for T55 AM2Bs, we've gone for T55 AM2s, and another stack of T55 AM2s there. We want as many tanks as possible, they're cheap and spammable, we want many, many, many tanks. I've also taken the PACT because I do quite like these guns. They're not the be-all and end-all, but in the defensive position, because they do have the nice missile, they can be a deterrent, if nothing else. The issue is they are very susceptible to artillery. And I've just taken the cheap command tank because I get 2 of them, and they shouldn't be on the front line in my opinion. At least not close enough to get shot. Next up for Recon, I've taken the BRM-1. Because it has exceptional, and exceptional is good right now. I've taken the Alf Clara with the UAZ Recon because it's an extra Recon unit, and I've also tried the Alf Clara Heavy with the BMP-1 Recon. I'm just really curious if that BMP-1 with its good optics can impress me versus other small vehicles. It might not, we'll see. Depends if other people are using Recon correctly. Anti-air wise, I've completely ignored the Strela. I love taking a manpad, but I just can't bring myself to do it. I really want to just see how I go with purely vehicles. So Shilka, Cubs and Strelas. The Strelas I like just for a little bit of harassment that I don't have to micromanage. Helicopters, I've gone for 2 sets of the Mi-8 TV Rocket 2s because of the number of rockets you get, even if they are more expensive than the other deck. I'm sure that'll all be getting corrected in a patch soon. And I'm also taking the Mi-24P anti-tank, the standard one, because I'm not too bothered about having more missiles. I prefer it to have the 80 rockets. Personal preference again. Air-wise, you're going to have to jiggle this about to your personal preference and your playstyle. I've taken the MiG-23 because I want cheap anti-air option. I've taken the Su-22 seed plane because I want to have a seed plane to give a little bit of protection to bring in the HE bombers and the anti-tank jet. There is something to be said for the napalm jet. We have, as discovered previously, found that it does a lot of damage even to tanks. However, they are very expensive to bring in, and I'll be very sad when I lose them. They also have to get very close, whereas hopefully, for example, the anti-tank jet can fire its missiles and then start turning away before it goes over the enemy lines, whereas a napalm jet is going to have to go straight over the enemy lines. There are advantages to having long-range missiles on an anti-tank jet as opposed to bombs that you are dropping from closer range. Depending on how the... Okay, so let me be honest with you here. The scaling in WARNO causes an issue with that plan because distances are so short on the map compared to something like Wargame Red Dragon. Often even your anti-tank jets are over the enemy lines as they're firing. So I say that full well in the knowledge that it doesn't work quite as well for WARNO. It is what it is. But that's the deck. Have a play around with it yourself and let me know in the comments how you would play it and what you would take differently, especially when it comes to aircraft, as I know people have very different playstyles to me. But thanks for watching, everyone. Please do like, share, subscribe. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.